Okay, he'll be presenting IRMA, practical, decentralized, and privacy-friendly identity management using smartphones.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. Hope the audio is okay. Good. Okay, so this is work with a lot of people. There are a couple of them on the slides. There actually have been more people working on this in the Netherlands. So my name is Wouter Lueks. I'm currently in Madrid working with Camela, but this work was primarily done while I was still in Nijmegen in the Netherlands. So I realized that I'm standing between you and ice cream break. So rather than talking about the Netherlands, we're actually going to talk about this little continent. So if you don't recognize this, this is Antarctica. On Antarctica, we have penguins. It's much more interesting than Dutch people, okay? So for the purpose of this talk, we're going to assume that this penguin government is looking for a way to replace their slightly old-fashioned password-based electronic identity system with something that is slightly more modern. And why would they want to do this? Well, they want to do this because passwords are on a security scale, they're hard to remember, users forget them, you have to send out new passwords, someone needs to come to your home actually to deliver this, super annoying. And then password-based authentication or authentication in general is not very good for use cases where you want to retain a certain amount of anonymity because by construction, you identify yourself when you use your username and password. So they've been looking into something that is slightly more modern. So they want something that is secure, something that is a bit more privacy friendly, so that they can also do authorizations, like I'm old enough to do this thing, and they want something that is preferably easy to use. Now, at some point, they might talk to a scientist, and the scientist might think about all the recent work that has been published, like at cryptographic conferences, maybe at PATS, and might propose, like, why don't you use attribute-based credentials, right? Because attribute-based credentials seem to be a reasonable match for what they want to do, because with attribute-based credentials, you can, in some sense, build the digital equivalent of your old-school identity documents. So here is an example of like an attribute-based credential that you might envision. It has a couple of fields, like name, over 18, social security number, nationality, and they're sort of grouped in like something that resembles a certificate, and there's also like this nice stamp by some organization that has something to say about this. So this could, for example, be Penguin government in this case, right? It should be able to know all these fields. Now, so far, this thing is not so much different from your good old typical certificate. But what makes attribute-based credentials interesting from sort of a privacy point of view is that you can choose which of these fields to reveal when you're showing this to a third party. So you can basically block out some of these fields. And they're like, but can I then still verify this? Yes, you can actually still verify this. So you can bank out some of these fields, but you can still check that this 18 plus was certified by the Penguin government. Now, if you want to file your taxes, like none of us wants, but I mean, at some point you have to, you can actually instead choose to reveal your social security number and your nationality, and also that would allow you to work with this credential. And you might envision that you not only get credentials from your government, but maybe also from your local Starbucks in the form of a loyalty card. Now, this already helps you to obtain like a higher measure of privacy than you have with traditional certificates, because you can sort of selectively hide things that you don't want to show or that you don't need for your specific application. Now, there is one other thing that actually increases your privacy by a lot, is that these things are by design unlinkable. So if I see two credentials that both have the same fields revealed, so both say that I'm older than 18, you really cannot distinguish whether that was me twice or one's me and one's Roger, assuming Roger is over 18. Right? So this gives you a lot of extra privacy that you don't have with these typical systems. Now, a natural question is, can we get this, right? I mean, can we actually use this? Well, Penguin scientists would say, like, you know what, there are papers on this. There's one here, but there are actually many papers on this. And there's some math. It's not so complicated, and this is a math slide meant to impress, so let's take that off. And there is actually a library that implements this mathematics. So it sort of takes the mathematics, wraps it into a light shell so that you don't need to deal exactly with the mathematics, but something is still relatively technical. But the problem with this is that even though quite a bit of work went into this, this is not something that you can give to your regular user. And by your regular user, I mean someone who is not in this room, right? Or someone who does not attend sort of crypto conferences. These things are definitely still too low level to be easy to use for ye good old user. And at the same point, actually your application developer that needs to build a website has a similar problem, right? There's this obscure JavaScript library where maybe I don't need to do the mathematics per se, but I still need to know pretty damn well what is going on there and able to actually use this. So there are problems for users and also problems for service providers. So that is where IRMA comes in. So IRMA decided to build like a usable, to the best of our ability at least, implementation of attribute-based credentials. So we took something that was called edmix, and we tried to make something that users could use. Now, to allow users to use this, we made this nice smartphone application that you can actually find on the App Store and try and download it. And it should actually work, and it should not even break my demo. That is sort of a digital wallet for all the credentials that you might obtain from different parties. And you can't see it here, but there's actually a list of these things. I can look at them, and I can actually use them. So suppose for sake of argument that there's actually something called Penguin Tube, where I can look at pictures and movies and whatever, provided that I sort of signed up for this. So think of this as Penguin Netflix. Maybe that would have been a better name. And Penguin government is a little bit odd because they decided that like little penguins should be protected against pictures from very, very ferocious animals. So when you want to see pictures of ferocious animals, you definitely need to be older than 12 years old, otherwise definitely a no-go, right? So suppose they actually made this website. Well, suppose that the demo is sort of live. So I can actually press this button, and then something happens. And now, why do I see a QR code? I see a QR code because I have things on my phone. I have credentials on my phone, but somehow I need to interact with this website. So this QR code allows us to set up this connection. So if all of this sort of works, and there's a little bit of challenge. There we go. So what I'm now being asked, and I will show you a screenshot in a second, is whether I want to reveal that I'm over 12 years old and that I'm a member of this awesome Penguin Netflix. So let's say that that is indeed a good idea. We get this awesome picture of ferocious polar bears, who, even though they don't live on Antarctica, are definitely on the blacklist. Okay? So this is what I actually saw when I was looking at this phone, right? So I get this permission dialog asking me exactly, do you want to reveal these attributes? And do you want to reveal this to this suspiciously named test SP? Normally you would see their Penguin Tube, but this is for the demo, right? So this, I think, allows the user much more control in order to decide when to use their credentials and whatnot. And there are actually some problems with this, so if you want to ask questions about that, the Q&A would be a good time for that, although if you want to heckle me now, that would also be okay. Yes?
The dropouts, can I say, actually, I'm not over 12?
So you cannot say you're not over 12, but you might envision that you have different sources for over 12, right? And this would actually allow you to select one of these. Now, for over 12, this might not be super obvious that is what you want to do, but if you think of a phone number, for example, that might definitely be sort of a legit thing to do, especially if you have many of them. So you can actually select which one. So this sort of focused on the user side, and I hope this makes this shows that this is a lot easier than having to deal with sort of low-level cryptographic libraries. And also for the service providers, we try to make this as easy as possible. So because in some sense, there is complicated cryptography going on sort of under the hood here. So in order to make sure that not every service provider needs to handle all these stupid math, we actually made a server that takes complicated cryptographic notions and turns them into something that is relatively standard in the current online world, namely a signed JSON Web Token. That is going to be a simple representation of these attributes that were just verified. And we made this in such a way that basically every service provider could deploy their own, but if they really don't want to, they can sort of get this as a service. Now, that is one part of sort of the server-side solution. The other part is that we created some JavaScript that allow service providers to easily build a website to interact with this. Now, to show you that this really is not so complicated, here is the source code of basically all the essential things of the demo I just showed you. So what did I need to do? I needed to say, OK, there's this over 12 thing that I want to verify, and there is this one attribute that would satisfy this. And to answer that question, you can put in multiple things if you accept multiple things. Same thing for membership. And part of the engineering that we had to do went into sort of sorting out that we have this demo domain, wherein there is an organization called Penguin Tube, where there exists some credential for membership things with a specific attribute name. Yes?
What enforces that the label that you display to the user corresponds to the attribute that you're actually querying?
Actually, you don't.
So I can say label over 12, attribute diagnosed HIV positive?
That would be embarrassing. But
And the app would allow this?
the app would allow this currently, and this is actually something that we need to work on, and there are probably many more problems that we need to work on, but this is definitely one of them. Thank you. What I can say, though, in defense of this, if you were to actually look at the drop-down box, it would show you, but that is probably not what you want. OK, but so to wrap this up, the service provider creates a request out of this, and then makes this one call to IRMA saying, OK, here is the request, and this is what you need to do when things succeed or fail. So relatively simple. Now, one other question that you so far have not asked me is, like, how do we solve this penguin and egg problem, right? Do I first have credentials? If I don't have credentials, nobody will want them because nobody has them. If nobody has them, nobody will want them, right? So how do we bootstrap sort of this problem? So here is what we did in the Netherlands. We took various sources, so electronic passports, electronic driver's license, and we sort of parse them digitally, process them, and then issue credentials based on them. And actually the one that is maybe slightly more interesting is this Surf Connects, which probably doesn't mean anything to any of you, which is the Dutch federated identity management system of, let's say, all university staff and students. And we do sort of like a bidirectional link between them. So we can take attributes from this system and turn them into IRMA credentials, but also vice versa. We can use the IRMA credentials to access this system. And this actually means that we need to translate between something SAMLy and horrendous and something equally horrendous, but then mathematically. So to sum up, so we try to make these attribute-based credentials easy by, on the one hand, for the user, create an app that is easy to use, or at least hopefully somewhat easy to use, minus modulo some UI issues. And for the service providers, we make this server and JavaScript combination that sort of takes care of all the nitty-gritty details that allow you to very quickly interact with IRMA when you want to. Now, that is not to say that there are no problems with this approach, right? I just summed up a couple of them. Nick mentioned another one. One of the first ones is that actually we went through great lengths to get anonymity at the application layer, and then I'm connecting using my IP address. So actually, we really need this nice library that Tor is developing in order to route traffic from the app directly via Tor. So I hope that comes soon, because I would really like to integrate this so that we get anonymity both on the application level and at the network level. Now, another thing that we're working on, which is really work in progress, is how to protect the key that is essential for securing this application, which is currently just inside the Android application, and Android applications, they're really not so secure. And then, like, I'm claiming that this app is somewhat easy to use, right? But for that basically means that I've been working on this for 4 years, and to me, this sort of kind of logical. But this typically means that for all the other people, that is probably not the case. So I'd love to do some kind of user study evaluation to hash out some of the problems with the UI and make sure that things are more sane than they currently are. And then finally, so far, we have taken the approach that we really focus on sort of the basic thing. We want to do these credentials. We're going to reveal some attributes, and that's what we're going to stick with. But what you actually see is that many interesting privacy-enhancing technologies use credentials as a building block to build other cool things. So it might be interesting to look into ways to combine these and then actually build more cool things. So that is more or less the end of my talk. I'm happy to answer any of your questions, suggestions, comments, whatever.